Good afternoon. Welcome to the Board of Water Resources Board meeting. We'll call this meeting to order. Today is August the 5th, 2021. It's 1 p.m. We're at the Natural Resource Auditorium where this meeting is being held today. My name is Blaine Ibsen. I'm chairman of the Board of Water Resources. We have all of our board members present today with the exception of Randy Crozier, who is not with us today. So welcome board members. We did meet earlier this morning in a briefing meeting. Welcome each of you who are here present with us today. Those who may be watching virtually. Director Adams, would you like to go through the list of who is here, please?
Sure. Part of our staff, Lindsay Russell is on leave, so Ati is taking notes for us, so we're excited to have her here. Other members of our staff, Todd Stonley, Assistant Director over Planning, Randy Staker, Joel Williams, Assistant Director over Development, Candace Hossenyeger, our Deputy Director, Shalane DiBernardi, our Manager over Project Funding section, and Ben Merritt, I see, and that's the Marty Bushman, our Attorney General's legal counsel, is here. So that's the staff that we have here that I can see. And we want to thank Paul Gedge for helping us do the techno savvy stuff that he does with getting this online and what have you. So,
And I echo that with Paul. Thank you so much, Paul. Paul's had a busy year this is our second board meeting that we've been able to have in person due to COVID this year. So most of our meetings for the last actually close to 2 years, have been virtual type meetings. And it is nice to be able to meet in person again.
And Mr. Chairman, we do have a few members of citizens that are at our meeting, and we'll read those in as we get to agenda items. If we miss you, we will do something at the end to take public comment if you would like to say something. So,
okay, thank you. Okay, with that, we will go into our agenda items. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from our last board meeting. Board members, you've had a chance to go through the minutes. Any discussions on any of the minute items?
Mr. Chairman, this is Charles Holmgren. I believe the minutes are factually correct. However, I would point out on page 5 of the briefing meeting minutes that I made an error in my statement of the Box Elder County cities getting approximately $10,000 per person. That number should have been $100 per person. I did say that in fact, but to correct that error, although the minutes are correct, just to point that out, to note that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second that motion.
Did you make a motion then, Charles?
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the minutes as written with that footnote that I made that error. So.
Oh, okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Yes.
Norman seconds the motion. Okay, prior to taking a vote on the motion, that one item of clarification, the minutes as written are correct. If I understood what you said, Charles, they are correct, but we would need to, in brackets, leave the minutes as they are, as I understand it, and put a footnote in brackets that rather than being for $10,000, it was for $100 per person. So if Adi, if you can adjust that. So that's a little clarification on that. Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion or clarification on the motion? Okay, we'll take a vote on it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we have unanimous vote in favor of approving the minutes from all board members present. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is a drought update. Candace Hossenyeger will give us an update on that. Candace, if you can, and just logistically, those who are participating today, when it's your turn on the agenda, if you can come up to the table here And we have 2 microphones, so if you can come up to the table, we'd appreciate it. Candace, tell us about the drought, something that's good news. It has been raining, yes.
Yes. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Candace Hausneger, Deputy Director at Water Resources. Thank you, Chairman of the Board and members of the board. And it is a better day to be here. I think maybe we're all feeling a little bit lighter from, having a little bit of precipitation, which we'll cover here. If I can know what button to push. Paul, will you forward this slide? Or Carmen? Thank you. One more. So we had a drought response committee meeting yesterday afternoon, and Glenn Merrill gave a presentation, and he showed this photo from Enoch. We did have a significant amount of precipitation in a short period of time that caused a lot of flooding, especially down south, but even impacts up here as well. Next slide. And it was in the news, right? And one of the questions that we've been getting a lot this week is, it rained. Aren't we out of drought yet? And unfortunately, we're not out. But we'll cover that. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit more about the precipitation that we did have. So this is a map that Glenn showed that shows the 14-day precipitation accumulation as a percent of normal. So it's kind of hard to see the state, but it's right there in the center. And those bright purples and bright pinks, hot pinks, if you remember the 80s, is about 600% of normal. So there was a ton of precipitation that came down in a very short period. Next slide. Oh, okay. And interestingly, if you look at this is a statewide precipitation chart of all of our snow tell sites. So these are high mountain elevation sites. You do see a little kind of blip up, but you can still see that we are pretty low as far as our total precipitation for the year. And if you combine the precipitation deficit from the end of 2020, we need about 15 inches of rain to make that up. So we are still, unfortunately, in the hole, but the rain did help. And we'll show that in the next slide. Go ahead. One more. So this is soil moisture. So we're feeling all the extremes this last year. Last fall, we had record dry soils. As you can see in this chart, it shows the percent saturation. And this is once again statewide average for our snow tell sites. And then on the x-axis, you can see the time period. So last fall, we hit record lows. And then this last couple of weeks, that next circle to the right, you can see the huge spike up. So we did get a lot of precipitation that soaked into our soils and improved our soil moisture, which if we can keep it, will help us next year with our runoff, which is good news. Okay, next slide. Let's look at the stream flow. So this is a daily flow chart, and I obviously am an engineer and just love charts, so hopefully you can indulge me just for a couple more. So this is a daily flow chart of 28 headwater streams, and we pick these streams because they're typically above large diversions, large reservoirs, so it kind of gives us what the natural flow conditions are. And you can see in here, the blue line is the last 30 years, the median, and then the black is this year, and the kind of goldenrod mustardy color is the minimum of that 30 years. So we have just been flirting with that minimum, below it, sometimes above it. And you can see on, whoa, it did something. Cool, it's working now. You can see that kind of spike up at the tail end this last couple of weeks. Once again, if you look at the cumulative effects of those flows throughout the year, so this is the cumulative daily flow in millions of acre feet on the y-axis, and on the x-axis, you see the date range. We are still below that previous minimum. There was a little spike up, but it is kind of a drop in the bucket, a very fast, very powerful and dangerous at times intense storms that we had. But unfortunately, they did not make a huge difference in our water supply conditions. And we can see that also in the reservoir levels. This is a great graphic that is, our office puts out. Thanks to our GIS and data folks for all the data collection they've been doing this last number of months. But you can see we have about 32 of our largest 42 reservoirs that are below 55% capacity. So we dropped about 2% this last week. So we are still seeing, people using water. And we all know that rain doesn't fill our reservoirs. It's snow and it's the runoff. And this just became apparent. Also, the Great Salt Lake, it was actually on July 24th. We had the Great Salt Lake fall below its previous record low. So now we are, as Jordan Clayton has been saying this year, is we've been setting all the wrong records with Great Salt Lake falling below the previous historic low that was set in 1963. Just one more indication of our poor water year and the extreme drought that we're in. And just to kind of compare, did the precipitation make any difference looking at the drought monitor? So this is from July 20th compared to August 3rd. And you do see improvements in the drought monitor map, but it's still, exceptionally dry, exceptionally extreme and exceptional drought throughout the state. There were slight improvements though. And then the Outlook, Glenn Merrill shared this yesterday at the Drought Response Committee meeting, is we kind of have a high pressure over us, so they're not anticipating any large events in the next couple of weeks. So give people time to dry out and things, but so it'll be interesting to see what happens after that. But we are seeing, above average temperatures and little drier conditions. And we have been doing a ton of outreach, media and radio and all sorts of things. We have also been really fortunate to have a very proactive governor who has been very supportive of our response and how we need to kind of really fast-tracked our efforts as far as water conservation and how we use water. He really focused particularly on municipal and industrial, with integrating land use and water planning, trying to fast track some of these, statewide installation of secondary water meters, expanded turf buyback programs, those type of things, as well as agricultural optimization. We all recognize that this will take all of us, as far as the legislative, the policymakers, those that appropriate money, to really fast track these. But it's great to have the governor's support and interest and desire to work with our legislative body. And then lots of social too. Once again, Governor Cox, prepared some videos that we could put out with our social media campaign with Slow the Flow. We have tons of signs as far as, yellow is the new green, and doing our part to save water. So I know some of you already picked them up, but if you need some, come to DNR. And then also we are seeing successes. I talked to Laura Briefer last week, and she said that looking at their water use this year compared to the last 3 years, that they've saved about 20% water. Their demand is down about 20%. And that's just one example, but we're seeing, institutions, this is a school that's, saving water and doing their part there too. So that's super, super exciting. But we know we're not out of the drought yet, as you all are well aware, and just trying to hold over till the end of the irrigation season. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Questions for Candace? Any board members have any questions? Thank you, Candace. Appreciate it. Okay, next item on our agenda, we'll go into our project component of the agenda. First project is project number RE444. It's for Willow Creek Irrigation Company. So if the representatives for Willow Creek Irrigation Company will come sit at the table, please. Okay, we the ones that are here first, we have Jeffrey Beck, Secretary Treasurer, and we have Clark Christensen, a board member for the board. And then we think that we have their president, Tyler Blackburn, virtually. We think he's on. So if you're there, Tyler, welcome. Just a few logistics where this is our first project that we'll be discussing. The rest will follow the same format. First, we will have a little presentation from the staff member, and today we have Ben Merritt will be giving the staff presentation on this. So first we'll hear from the staff member. Second, we'll hear from the applicant. So Willow Creek Irrigation, you board member secretary, if your president wants to have any input, we would welcome input from you. The next portion of it would be there'd be a question and answers from any of the board members that would like to ask from either Ben or from either of you or any questions on the project. After that, there will be see if there was any public comment received on it, and then the board will have a discussion, after which the board will take action on it. So that's kind of the logistics of the way it works. As far as if you're there, Tyler, virtually, if you can, if you're on your phone, *6 will mute or unmute your phone. If you're on a computer, Control-D will mute or unmute your phone. So if you're there and would like input, Tyler, if you can keep your phone or device muted until you want some comment, and then we'll get it. So with that, we'll have Ben give the presentation for staff, please, Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll see if this doohickey works. Guess not. Okay, yeah, that's perfect right there, that slide. Okay, so we have the Willow Creek Irrigation Company here with us today. They have submitted an application for financial assistance with the project to install 130 water meters. So the Willow Creek Irrigation Company, they supply agricultural water, secondary irrigation water, and potable water, which they sell directly to the Axtell Community Service Special Service District. So the project includes installing 85 secondary water meters and 45 agricultural water meters on those shareholders. The meters which will be installed range in size from about 3/4 of an inch to 8 inch. The applicant is choosing to perform most of the work in kind and is expected to begin construction as soon as funds are made available, ideally completing construction in the spring of next year. Any engineering that will be required will be completed by Sunrise Engineering. With the use of these water meters, they expect to conserve approximately 280 acre-feet of water, which will likely then be reused in their system. The project, if you go to the next slide, please. Oh, it's going to work now. Perfect. So the installation of water meters will conserve some water and also allow them to have a more equitable distribution of water throughout their system. The project is expected to cost about $371,000. Staff recommends that the board authorize 85% of the project cost, up to $315,500, and the project be purchased at 1% interest over 15 years, with annual payments of approximately $22,800. That's staff's report.
Thank you, Ben. Jeff or Clark, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I think you pretty well covered it. We have actually no metering right now. We actually have no metering right now, and we have been able to not control our secondary users in conservation or anything like that. And so we see this as a major savings in our system. Our system is online. It'll just be installing the meters on existing services right now. Did you have anything you wanted to say, Jeff?
Yeah, we took a step maybe 6 years ago to put in a meter that measures all of the delivery through the system, and we have a schedule that is supposed to account for how much water is appropriate to each shareholder. And there was a slide showing secondary meters 20 to 30% savings, and that's in the ballpark of what I've been doing the water master job as well as the secretary job, and that's about how much I can account for day in and day out. Drought or no drought is somewhere in the 25% ballpark. And so if we can get tighter control on our delivery, we'll be meeting our obligations to deliver water to the shareholders that own the water as it should be done.
Okay, thank you. Board members, any questions for Jeffrey or Clark or Ben?
I have one, Kyle Stevens on the board. What is your source of revenue for the repayment of the loan?
The water assessments.
Water assessments, and will those be being increased to meet the obligation of the loan, or have you had any rate increases?
We actually started about 3 years ago with the assessment by adding extra money that we've been putting away for the metering. And so we've anticipated this project for quite a while and hoped for, but the funding is just more than we've been able to come up with so far. We have bought and installed a few of these meters to make sure that they're going to meet our needs, and it looks like they will. We'll have be able to tell the water user exactly what he's using, and also throughout the system, everybody will be able to see the use of any individual. So it should help us conserve, we think.
Norman?
Is there going to be sticker shock for those who find out they are using the amount of water that
We hope so.
There's going to
They
be a
didn't
few
think they
unhappy
were?
people.
We've already got some unhappy people about putting meters in, so.
But the majority of the consensus seems to be that most people would like to know how much they're using because they want to use the right amount.
Any other questions, board members, discussion? Okay. There were no public comments received on this, it appears. So is there anyone that would like to make a comment on this project? Okay, with that, we'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that the board authorize 85% of the project cost up to $315,500. That project be purchased at 1% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $22,800.
Okay, we have a motion from Jim. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Norman seconds. Have a motion and a second. Is there, prior to taking a vote, is there any further discussion or clarification from the board? Okay, we'll take a vote then. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion carries unanimously from the board members present. Thank you. Congratulations and good luck on your project.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is under special items. And it is project number RL 588. It's Harriman City. And this, Ben will stay at the table. Ben is the staff member over that also. And it looks like today we have with us Justin Edwards, Director of Public Works. Welcome, Justin. And we have Jonathan Ward with the finance organization. Welcome, Jonathan. Okay, with that, Ben, if you want to give us the presentation then from staff.
Absolutely, thank you. So Harriman City has come to the board requesting a bond insurance grant. The bond insurance grant is essentially a grant given by the board to help reduce the insurance, or to purchase insurance for the bond to help reduce the interest rate and the issuance costs of the bond. And this is for a project that the city has completed portions of and is currently working on now. And I will quickly go over a few of the improvements that are being made and show a few pictures of some of the progress that's been made so far. The project has been divided into 5 different sections, which include installing about 7,000 feet of pipe, ductile iron and PVC pipe. Construction on this section concluded in June at a cost of approximately $1.5 million. East Harriman water improvements include a dual zone pump station and 2 2-million gallon water tanks. With a construction start date of spring 2022 and an expected cost of approximately $14.5 million. And I'm not sure exactly which of these photos go to which sections of the project, so I'll just slowly scroll through as I talk and you guys can look at them. So Juniper Canyon water improvements include interdevelopmental connections. These will provide redundancy to the water system. These were completed in June also at a cost of approximately $2.4 million. Zone 4 pump station, which includes pump replacement and upsizing pipelines and valves. These improvements have been completed at a cost of approximately $500,000. And Zone 5 pump station, which includes the installation of a new pump station. And these improvements are expected to begin spring 2022 at a cost of approximately $1.1 million. You see here's some pipe being fused. That's some HDPE pipe being fused together and laid. And there's some pipe right before burial. Staff recommends that the board provide a grant of up to $75,000 to purchase bond insurance, and this will reduce interest rate by about 0.15% from 2.4 to 2.34%, and will save the city approximately $453,176 over the bond repayment period. And that is staff support.
Thank you, Ben. Justin, Jonathan, have you got anything you'd like to add to what Ben has said?
Mr. Chairman and board members, we just greatly appreciate your consideration. As Ben mentioned, several of these projects have been completed, and then several are to come. So we were issued the bond, I think it was in April or so of this year, and we've been completing these projects and look forward to completing the rest, and appreciate your consideration.
Okay, thank you. Board members, any questions for Ben or Justin or Jonathan?
What is your projected completion date on the projects that are scheduled to start next spring?
So the East Harriman water projects, that is a fairly large project. So that will take 12 to 16 months. We have a couple of water tanks to construct and a pump station. And the Zone 5 pump station, that one will probably be an 8 to 10 month construction time.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Appreciate you being here, and I'll make another comment in a minute. But how long will your repayment period be with the bond?
It's a 20-year bond.
20-year. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, board members, any discussion you'd like to make on this? Okay, there were no public comments received virtually. Does anyone here have any comments they'd like to make on it? This project. Okay, we'll entertain a motion then on this project.
Mr. Chair, that's great. And before I make that motion, I'll just say I like the way that you've set this project up. I think that providing this grant for insurance, it's a small amount to get a really large project done. And I like that we're able to support this transaction taking place in the private sector. So with that, I would move that our board provide a grant of up to $75,000 to purchase bond insurance. This will reduce the interest rate. I don't think I need to put that into the motion? Why not? This will reduce the interest rate by about 0.15% from 2.49% to 2.34% and will save the city approximately $453,176 of the bond repayment period.
Okay, we have a motion. Prior to the motion, I guess it raises a question in my mind. Really, the motion, it looks like, would be the grant up to $75,000 to purchase bond insurance. The other's information.
Yes.
So the motion then is a grant up to $75,000.
That works.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, Wayne seconded the motion. Have a motion and a second. Prior to taking a vote, any discussion, clarification on this motion? Okay, we'll take a vote then. All in favor of this motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously by board members present. Congratulations and good luck on your projects.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks, man.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is project RD 674. This is Davis and Weber Counties Canal Company. And Rick Smith, General Manager, is here representing the company today. Welcome, Rick. And so Shalane is going to give the staff presentation. So Shalane.
Thank you, Chairman. In the late 80s, the company came to the board with a rather large project that was ultimately funded in phases. So in the 90s, the board entered into agreements with the company to build secondary irrigation systems in Kaysville and West Point City. And while each of them had different terms, there were a couple of things. The Kaysville project was, the board's funding was 8.3 million. The West Point project, it was approximately 4.8. The repayments were started low and increased every year. The numbers in front of you are for RD 674, the Kaysville project. To show you some of what's happened, payments in 1992 were only 166,000. They've increased approximately 6% every year. The interest rate was set at 5%. So last year's payment was $958,000. The agreement stated that the 8 remaining payments would simply be, the balance would be amortized over those last 8 years. On both of these projects, even though they're different numbers, different specific financial terms, a similar problem has come up. The Division of Finance, who actually takes care of collecting funds and sending bills, has been charging interest on deferred interest on both of these projects. So when those low payments in the beginning didn't cover the full amount of interest due, there was interest that was set aside to be paid later. But the Division of Finance charged that 5% interest rate on that deferred interest in addition to the principal that was still there. So as this slide shows, according to the Division of Finance, there has been no principal payment made yet. So the current principal balance is still $8.3 million. And so the final 8 payments should be $1,370,000. But we have documentation in the files going back for years to show that we do not believe that was ever the board's intent, to charge interest on the deferred interest. And so we have recalculated those numbers according to what payments have actually been made by the company. And for the Kaysville project, we believe there should actually be a balance of just over 6.9 million, and that those final 8 repayments should be closer to 975,000. So the Division of Finance has agreed that if the board votes and agrees to amend these 2 agreements, that they will modify their repayments to what we have calculated, not to what they have been charging. So the West Point project is actually slightly different. It still has deferred interest that has been accruing interest according to finance. Rather than an amortization, there are specified payments until the final year when the balance will be paid. So staff is recommending that the board amend both purchase agreements to state that no interest will be charged on deferred interest and that all other repayment terms will remain as contracted. That is staff's report.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Rick, what have you got you'd like to add?
Hopefully that was clear enough. As you well know, we've been great partners with the Division of Water Resources and appreciate your help in our projects. And as you can tell, these are the first 2 starting back 30 plus years ago. So we've been continually paying for those and plan on hopefully having those few last payments adjusted based on the new information that we've discovered over the last couple of years. But thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Okay, questions for Shalane or Rick from the board? Okay. Public comments. There was one virtual public comment received, and it came from Rick. And so we're going to read that. Rick said, and on the online, there have been questions on these repayment schedules for years, and we appreciate the coordination, time, and efforts of DWR staff to investigate further and working with state financing. We continue to pay back said loans, and these adjustments ensure we're not paying interest on deferred interest. We appreciate the board and their assistance over the decades that has sought and received funding. And so that was the public comment. Any other comments that anyone would like to give on this project? Okay, thank you, Rick, for that comment too. Okay, board members, any final discussion before we entertain a motion? Okay, we'll entertain a motion on this project then.
Okay, I would like to make the motion, but before I do, I need to make a couple of clarifying statements. First of all, I live in Kaysville, so I don't know if I need to declare a conflict of interest or not. And I don't know if the area in which I live is a direct beneficiary of these projects or not. I'm assuming that it probably would be.
Are you on the board of the Davis and Weber County?
I am not,
Canal
no,
Company?
no.
I'm looking out to our attorney and he's shaking his head. I don't think there would be. I don't think there's a conflict. So.
I didn't think there was, but anyway, and then the previous slide that you had up, Shalane, to me, I mean, you went through the explanation, but as you actually see that information there in writing, that the payment started in 1992, and here we are almost 2022, and yet the only thing that's been paid is interest, and then interest on interest type situation. So that is kind of a compelling situation, but it's a compelling sign there to actually see it in print. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would make the motion that the board amend both purchase agreements to state that no interest will be charged on deferred interest and all other repayment terms will remain as contracted.
Okay, we have a motion from Kyle. Do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, Kyle made the motion, Jim seconded the motion. Prior to voting on the motion, any clarification or discussion on it? Okay, all in favor of this motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries unanimously by those board members present. So it will be amended as that you're not going to pay interest on deferred interest.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rick. O- Okay, the next item on the agenda just notes that we have received a new application, RE 450, from Draper Irrigation Company, and no action is being taken on that. That's just an informational item. We did receive a new application on that. Okay, so the next item on the agenda will be the planning report, right?
You might want to read these names.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Dreyfus.
Dreyfus, okay. Okay, we're going to read in some of the attendees that are here that we have received. John Dreyfus. Okay, welcome, John, as a student. Jim, same. Over here. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm not overly great with names. James Chase Dreyfus also. Okay, welcome. Lauren Pasternak. Welcome, Lauren. Adele Young. Welcome, Adele. And Justin Atkinson. Welcome, Justin. So welcome each of you.
Mr. Chairman, it looked like John and Adele wanted to address the board. Is there any particular report that you would want to, or just at the end? I guess would be my question, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
That's when you'd prefer to?
Okay.
Okay, all right,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll do.
Mine is very simple. One sentence request, and I can do it anytime you desire.
Do that at the end.
Okay. Okay, why don't we do that at the end also? Just keep those together if we can. Okay, good. Okay, we will continue on with our agenda then, and the next item on the agenda is a planning report on the Great Salt Lake water elevations, and Jake is going to give that to us. Jake?
Good afternoon, Chairman Ibsen, members of the board. Craig Miller was planning to give this presentation. He's one of the foremost experts in Great Salt Lake hydrology. So it's humbling and an honor to be asked to sit before him or to stand in for him. And I hope that since I'm not the expert, that absolves me from having to answer any questions on the topic. So does it work?
Hey, Jake, if you can move your mic over closer to your face,
Okay.
that would be good.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So wanted to start out just going over a few of the things that make Great Salt Lake great. You can't cover all of it in this short time. I'll give some information on how Great Salt Lake is measured, what the current levels are, and some of the records that we've seen this year. Talk about some of the major effects on lake levels, and then a little bit of a projection on where we're headed. So since we have photographs from space, why not start with that? It gives us a good perspective. So we can see here, you can't see me, you can't see my house, but you can see Great Salt Lake. And sitting there in the part of the Great American Desert, it is quite a jewel and refuge. So it is the largest saline lake in the Western Hemisphere. It covers an area, wetted area of around 2,300 square miles, though this can fluctuate greatly because the lake is shallow. It's obviously the namesake of Utah's capital city and the county. So a lot of my acquaintances and friends say Great Salt Lake is for the birds, though I strongly disagree with them. Literally speaking, they are correct. So this image provided by the Division of Wildlife shows tracks pelican flight paths using solar powered tags. And so you can see the movements extensive down through Mexico all the way up to Montana. But you can see that Great Salt Lake is sort of a heart of pelican movements here. So every year, upwards of 10 million birds, hundreds of species fly to Great Salt Lake to rest, to eat, and to breed. Part of the reason for that is because at least 85% of Utah wetlands are found surrounding Great Salt Lake. And of course, not just birds, but we derive quite a bit of value from the lake, not just in terms of the $1.3 billion in economic activity, but in the minerals and resources that go into the national economy. So here you see a map that shows Great Salt Lake, which is artificially divided into two main segments by the railroad causeway. We call it the North Arm and the South Arm, and you can see the three main inputs there. So because it's a saline lake, I wanted to mention a little bit about salinity. So in 1904, a trestle bridge was constructed called the Lucin Cutoff, which bypassed the Promontory Point and Golden Spike, much faster route to California. In 1959, the trestle bridge was replaced because of maintenance costs and troubles with a rock-filled causeway, and that really disrupted flow of water and salt between the north and south arm. And so because of that, eventually in 2016, a breach was constructed between the north and south arm, and at the time of the breach, the south arm was approximately 3 feet higher, so quite a bit. And then there are other causeways and dikes that have affected the lake hydrology and salinity. And so in the north arm, salinity is typically about 27%, which is saturation level. In the south arm, it fluctuates normally between 5 and 15%, though we're a little higher than that because of how low the lake is now. And so just to show you this image, that's why the north arm is a different color, because of the salinity, the algae, and biology that occur in the higher saline waters. And then you can also see the causeway that goes to Antelope Island there, and the waters there in Farmington Bay, how those are discolored and affected by the disruption in flow. And then, of course, you can see the mineral ponds surrounding the lake and what interesting colors those are, but all of those are artificial dikes or structures. So a little bit about the hydrology. Inflows are approximately 65% come from surface flows, 32% from direct precipitation on the lake, and then 3% from the groundwater. Of the rivers, the Bear provides somewhere around 55% of the inflows, the Jordan 26%, Weber 12%, and other ephemeral streams around 7%. Of course, these numbers can vary year to year. So a little bit about the measurement. The history of Great Salt Lake is really interesting. We have measurements from 1847 when the pioneers first entered the valley and began exploring Great Salt Lake. Those triangles there show different points where the lake has been measured or is currently measured. The USGS provides measurements now at the lake, one measurement on the north and one in the south arm at the marina at Saltaire. And just want to give our appreciation to USGS for their expert knowledge, for making their data publicly available, and for the high quality work that they do. They really are our eyes out there and provide valuable information daily. So then, and just another little note is that, of course, those measurements USGS provides are elevation measurements. So they're with reference to a gauge height or some datum. Volume have to be derived or calculated from the elevation. So this is the data that has been collected. You can see there we have it starting back in 1847. There's a light gray line that shows daily values or what values we have, and the black line is a smooth line just to show kind of the overall trends of the lake. And so what's interesting is you can see there are a lot of cycles, irregular cycles, but cycles nonetheless. There are annual cycles, so every year there's a peak and there's a trough. There are decadal cycles, so roughly every 10 years. And there are also multi-decadal signals. So for example, you can see around 1870, the lake peaked up around 4212, and then it declined down to what was the historic low in 1963. So it's about 90 years. And then you can see it rose dramatically and peaked in the mid 80s. And now we're back down around the low levels, although in just 40 years. So far less than happened before. So anyways, these cycles are really interesting to us, interesting to try to understand what the lake does and where it's going. So there's also an interannual range. And the average change in the lake from high to low across these years is 3 feet. The maximum was 5 feet, and the minimum was 0.8. And so here's just showing you the same graph, but shorter, just from 1955. And that's because we want to show that red line at the bottom. That's tagging the year 1964 when the lake hit its low level. So the lowest peak elevation was 4192.9. That occurred in 1963. This year, we hit that record. The lowest minimum elevation was 4191.4. That's what the red line shows. And that occurred also in 1963. And so the current level of Great Salt Lake, 4191.2. So we've surpassed the minimum elevation and are continuing to drop. So it's interesting to also look at lake volume. And 2016 was actually the lowest lake volume because, like I said, before the causeway was breached, the north arm was 3 feet lower than the south arm. And when you calculate the volume, that was actually the lowest year. Currently, we're at 9.0, so just right there. So what affects the lake level? Well, there are a few factors. Salinity and evaporation have an effect. So the higher the salt level, the lower evaporation. So because of the causeway, the south arm is fresher, so evaporation rates are higher. Meteorological drought reduces stream flow and water getting to the lake. So of course the lake will reflect those drought cycles. Heat, so increased solar radiation, increased temperatures can also increase evaporation. And then what happens upstream in the watershed, that has an effect on the lake. In terms of water that we deplete, agriculture is the greatest, around 63%, but mineral extraction around the lake also has the really big impact, 13%, municipal and industrial 11%, the impounded wetlands, which are artificial wetlands, 10%, and upstream reservoirs, 3%. An interesting study that was done looked at putting the historic water depletions back into the lake to see where would the lake have been if we weren't here, basically. And so we took those depletions, added them back into the Great Salt Lake simulation model. So the red line, the dashed red line there, shows observations by the USGS in the south arm, and that red line, diagonal line, is the a trend line, or the average of the lake. And the solid blue line, that shows the simulated lake, what it would be in maybe a natural condition. And the difference there at the end in 2020 is around 11 feet. So you could conclude that the impact of human development has been 11 feet, or lowering the lake around 11 feet. So where are we headed? The USU Climate Center, they actually provide long-range forecasts of Great Salt Lake. And so pulled that information, and you can see here they have a projection that goes out to 2026. And this relies on past lake levels, a lot on the cycles. Like I mentioned, that's really what they analyze. And future, what they expect the future weather to be in those years. And the main thing to point out here is that it's not going up. So it looks like kind of a dry period forthcoming. When we look at what the lake has done in the past, we can pull some similar years and try to give a range for what might happen. And looks like the lake could drop, and the lake will continue dropping, likely into November, weather dependent, and an additional 0.6 to 2 feet, which would equate to and setting a new minimum elevation record of 4190.6 to 4189.2. So that's it.
Thank you, Jake. That was interesting. Board members, any questions for Jake?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, just a comment. Thanks, Jake. I'd always like to see all of that data all in one place. And so I was just wondering if you would share your slides with the board. Excellent. Thank you. See, an easy question for you.
Yeah, I can. Yes, I can do that.
Thank you, Jake. Appreciate that. And we didn't receive, this isn't an action item. This was an informational item on our agenda. So there's no action, no voting or anything on this item, but we didn't receive any public comments on this item. We did have John in person. John, if you'd like to come up, you have some comments on the Bear River Development, Great Salt Lake. If you'd like to come up, speaking to the microphone. Generally, our procedure has been in public comments that we receive in this meeting, we've limited them to 2 minutes. So if you can be brief with your comments, John, please. Okay, thank you.
Press the button on the microphone there. Thank you. Yep, and it'll turn green.
Good afternoon. My name is Jake Dreyfus, and I'm a 5th generation lifelong Utah resident. Like many Utahns, the drought implications on our waterways have left me terrified, and predictions indicate climate change will make these warmer, drier conditions our new norm. Recently reaching historic lows, the Great Salt Lake's elevation will continue to plummet throughout the coming months. This news sounds the alarm for countless Wasatch Front residents like myself. However, using taxpayer money, the DWRE has bought up millions worth of land for the Bear River development, which would dam and divert more than 20% of the lake's most significant water source. The division has slashed statewide water conservation goals from 1% to 0.5% per year. Aligned with the goals of other Western states, more than 50 Utah businesses have implored Governor Cox to increase reductions to 2% per year. Instead of funneling money into destroying northern Utah's most iconic landscape, statewide initiatives to conserve water, which could entirely negate the need for the massive Bear River development, should be priority number 1. While some conservation measures have successfully reduced water use throughout Utah, our taxpayer dollars should not facilitate a wasteful $2.9 billion Bear River development we will never be able to pay back. Paired with the effects of climate change, depletions from the development will lower the Great Salt Lake's level by several more feet. The Bear River development stands to hurt northern Utahns, not help us. Further diversion will expose vast swaths of dust-laden lakebed, sending toxic particulates into the air, worsening pollution throughout Salt Lake Valley. The $1.3 billion economy surrounding the lake will disappear alongside the receding shorelines. Depletions will cripple thousands of acres of wetlands, killing unique habitat millions of birds depend on during their annual migrations. I will finish by asking, do you before me want to be part of the generation who will render the Great Salt Lake unsalvageable? Are you willing to leave your children, willing to leave my future children behind to breathe in toxic air? wonder where the birds have gone, and dream of floating in the lake's buoyant waters? Or will we collaborate and ambitiously set out to preserve this unique ecosystem through common sense water conservation? Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. So you go by Jake.
Yeah,
John.
legal
you-
name is John, but I go by Jake.
You go by Jake. That's what I thought. Okay. Thanks. Appreciate your comments, Jake.
Yeah, thank you.
Well thought out. Thank you. Okay. Why don't we right now, Adele, if you'd like to come give your comments you have?
Members of the board, audience, my name is Adele Connell Young. I am a longtime resident of Utah, coming from 4 different generations of pioneer stock on one side of the family, and the other side of the family, wonderful Irish Catholic people. I am simply here to ask one question, and I think it's a question that you all have posed to your respective areas. But I'm asking that you ask it again to your respective areas with more oomph. As a retired U.S. Army colonel, I am quite used to having goals for my generals that have been given to me, that I have passed down on their behalf. And having a doctorate degree from the University of Utah, I'm quite used to having been given goals that I had to meet. Now, each one of you have goals to have water conservancy plans. I believe that you yourself have the goal of having a water conservancy plan. My simple, very basic request is to publish the plans of your areas. Who represents Jordan Valley? Juliet's plan for Jordan Valley is superb. You should all take a look at it. As noted by Rachel Shilton, Rachel from Utah State University, it is absolutely wonderful. So mine is just a simple request for private citizens such as myself from Stansbury Park to see that from every single area in Utah online. Thank you, members of the board.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Adele. Okay, thank you. Now, next item on the agenda we'll go into will be a report on the Lake Powell pipeline report. Joel Williams from staff will be doing that. Joel?
I'm assuming Randy needs him, or not Randy, Paul needs a minute to get it loaded. And I guess while we're waiting, I can give a little backstory on the project. So we have been in the environmental permitting phase for a number of years now, working currently with the Bureau of Reclamation, who put out the draft environmental impact statement last year, and the public comment period concluded in September. So we're coming up on a year ago that occurred. 14,000 comments were received on that, and the Bureau of Reclamation has since been in a phase of addressing those comments and preparing a supplement to the draft environmental impact statement. And so we are still currently in that phase of addressing comments, and we know that they're working on it because every once in a while they'll reach out to us with questions seeking additional information. And so, as you can see, here's some of the key efforts that are still underway. Reclamation is continuing to work on the the draft EIS, the supplement. We have submitted our water rights change application to change the point, just to have the point of diversion continue to be Flaming Gorge, but then add a point of rediversion at Lake Powell. And that we're still waiting on a decision from the state engineer on that application. The discussions are going on with the Basin states to talk about questions and concerns, and those discussions are ongoing. We are continuing to work on public education and outreach. As you've probably seen, there's been a lot of interest in the Colorado River and Lake Powell and Lake Mead and their elevations with the drought year that we're facing, and seeing some of those low elevations, Lake Powell being down around 30%. It's concerning, and it's something that we're all watching closely and trying to address questions and deal with any questions on whether it be citizens or the news. It's a difficult time right now, and I think in some ways you can see that we're watching to see what happens. The Army Corps 404 permit and the Utah 401 water quality certification permit, those are some things that will continue to move along as the project moves through the environmental permitting phase. And the Fish and Wildlife Service biological opinion is similar in that the draft has been prepared and will be finalized along with the other environmental documents. And then following the approval of the environmental process, then Reclamation would be able to sign their exchange agreement, which currently is being called the Section 14 agreement. And so things have been pretty similar. As maybe you've noticed the last few presentations, we've kind of been in this same pattern of additional work going into that supplemental draft. We do not yet have a time frame from Reclamation of when they anticipate that being released, but based on past discussions, what we've heard from them is possibly winter, meaning end of this year, beginning of next year, seeing the draft go out again for another comment period. That would then be followed by a final environmental impact statement and a record of decision that could come at the end of 2022. And following those would move into a final design and financing phase, and then construction. And those are hard to put a date on because it'll depend on how things go here right now with the completing the environmental permitting phase. So that's the report for now, and it we'll keep the board updated if things change. But right now it does seem like we're in a little bit of a wait and see phase. Any questions from the board?
Doesn't look like it. Thank you, Joel. Appreciate it. Okay, next item on our agenda, we will have legal counsel Marty Bushman will give us some information on water rights application that was filed from an entity in Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Martin Bushman. I'm an assistant attorney general at the Utah Attorney General's office, and here to talk about the Water Horse Reserve litigation. Water Horse Reserve is a limited liability company out of Colorado that filed a petition to appropriate 55,000 acre feet of water from the state of Utah along the Green River. That application was filed with the Utah State Engineer's Office for that water to then be piped to the Front Range of Colorado for consumptive municipal use. The board and the Division of Water Resources, along with quite a few other entities, protested this application for some obvious reasons. And the state engineer on November 17th last year denied the application. And then on January 26, Water Horse filed a petition for judicial review in the 8th District Court for Daggett County, challenging the state engineer's denial. And this application and its current, judicial review presents some significant interests and harms of the state. This is water right now that, if approved, would arguably come out of Utah's upper Colorado River Basin apportionment, because the state of Colorado has not agreed that it would come under their water rights. They have not yet approved the places of use or purposes of use. And it leaves Utah in a rather a vulnerable position if this petition or this application were to be granted. And that would be 55,000 acre feet of water that would not now be available to the citizens of Utah and for potential use, and all at a time when we've got some declining hydrology in the Colorado River system and still needs for water. The board has some unique responsibilities with regard to interstate waters. You have water rights in that system. Some fairly significant water rights, some perfected, some not. And, an appropriation of this size could present a significant threat to those water rights as you try to sort through in the times of shortage, who gets curtailed and who doesn't. So I am recommending that the board intervene in the judicial proceeding with Waterhorse Reserves in order to protect its interests and abilities. They're unique. They're a little different than maybe what the state engineer is looking at or other entities. And would recommend, I say, that the board intervene in this action and authorize the Attorney General's office to file the appropriate documents in court to make that so, and to authorize it to continue to represent the board through the remainder of the litigation. Any questions? I'd be happy to respond.
Any questions for Marty on this?
I have a question of clarification, Marty, before we go to a motion. Is the correct name of the entity Waterhorse Reserves or Waterhorse Resources?
Reserves, sorry.
Reserves, okay.
Yes. Waterhorse Reserves, LLC.
Okay. With that, Mr. Chairman, then
We're not ready for the motion yet. We'll get there.
Can I back up?
Yes,
I
please.
believe it is resources. Is that, will you offer that? It is, it's resources.
Resources, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, any further questions for Marty on this? Okay, we did not have any public comments on this particular item. Does anybody here have any comments you'd like to make on it?
Go to court.
There you have it.
There you have it. That says it. Okay. Okay, at this stage, Marty has requested that the board have a motion to authorize him to go to court, the Attorney General's office, on that. Before we entertain a motion, board, any discussion on that? Okay, we'll entertain a motion then on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that, I will make the motion. I make the motion that the board intervene in the Waterhorse Resources litigation and authorize the Attorney General's office to seek intervention in the board's behalf and represent it through the course of the litigation.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. Okay, Wayne seconded the motion. Okay, prior to taking a vote on the motion, any clarification or further discussion on this motion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously by those present. So Marty, you're authorized to intervene and appreciate your efforts on this.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, next item on our agenda, we will have a water banking report update from Emily Lewis. So Emily, if you can come up and give us an update on the water banking.
Actually, Paul, can we start with the other one first, if that's feasible?
I have two presentations today. One is going to be focused on kind of where we are on the project perspective from the water banking project. And then the second presentation is going to just kind of preview our draft documents that we're working on for board review of pending applications. So I'm hoping that today will be really an opportunity just to kind of get you guys caught up on where we are. And then we're not in a we see this as kind of a slow rolling methodical process. And so, the goal is just to kind of small bites at a time. And then over the next couple board meetings, hopefully we can kind of come to a place where you guys feel comfortable with what we're doing. So real quick, today progress report, and then present draft materials. Then I want to leave myself open for any questions that anybody has. You guys have seen this a million times, so I won't belabor it. But for anybody who may be watching at home, if you're not familiar with what the water banking project is that, in response to, increased demands from a variety of purposes or a variety of places, the state of Utah in 2020 passed the Utah Water Banking Act that basically, at the end of the day, the goal was to, find a means to address these coming challenges. And we found that in other states, many states have looked to market tools to do so. And so activities to buy, lease, and sell water are increasing across the West. And so the purpose of the Utah project is to basically find a way to empower local water users to really be in the driver's seat of those market tools and market creations. We had a very robust stakeholder group process. Many of you have seen the many presentations on that, but I do think it's really important to always come back to kind of what the goals and agreed to goals of the group were. The entire process has been driven by three key principles, voluntary, temporary, and local. These are voluntary activities that are really driven by local water users who are interested in participating. We're focusing on leasing of water. And really, these are kind of hyper local markets. These are not very large scale markets. These are really intended to be something to address local demand and supply. And then kind of the theme that we worked on is to support Utah's growing water demands. Water banking could facilitate local, voluntary, and temporary transfers of water that generate income for water right owners and increase access to water. So just a very brief overview for anyone who may be newer to this. Really the goal of the act is to promote leasing arrangements. The act was drafted to extend certain benefits that were requested by the water user community during the drafting process. So everything that's really involved in the act has come from the water user community. It provides water users the ultimate flexibility to design a leasing arrangement. Leases can occur outside the Water Banking Act by all means. And actually, I'll talk about that here in our pilot projects. But the goal was also to extend some certain benefits that the water user community saw as needed and to address some barriers that were preventing greater market activity. So basically, our goal is to promote the development of market tools favorable to local water users. The other aspect of this project is we've had a lot of focus on the individual water banks that we're working on as pilot projects. But what the actual project is an $800,000 grant, both half of it from state appropriations and half from the Water Smart Water Marketing Grant to produce a statewide water marketing development strategy. And very much in the back of our mind in all of our discussions to date, we're taking notes about what are the barriers we're finding in people who want to explore market activities. What are the things that are working really well in the state? What are the things that if we could do a little differently, could probably help or facilitate local water users better design and participate in leasing arrangements. And so at the end of the day, what we'll do, the report will reflect our pilot project status, best practices and tools, as well as guidance for local water users who are interested in participating. And that's what I'm most excited about. Actually, we've got some really cool things happening about kind of taking our project, taking what we're learning and kind of putting it into a usable form. this slide is pretty simple. I kind of want to more focus on our documents that we have for you today. But essentially, the project management team is there working with the local water users in the pilot areas. Our goal is to help understand the purpose and the function of the act, to facilitate conversations. We attend many, many meetings, and we have many, many email chains. But it's been really great, honestly. We've met so many wonderful people, and it's been a really fun project to work on. We've also assisted with, doing some technical scoping. We've written several different draft contracts for local water users for them to review, but also go back to their own council and review. We have talked about various variations of different market tools and leasing arrangements that people have used at other places in the West, and had the local water users pick what they think would work best for them. So really, we've kind of taken the various expertise of our team members and really used that to assist the local water users. And then, and this is kind of just reiterating this more from kind of like the state side, kind of like there's kind of two aspects of this. There's working with the local water users, but also working with our state partners. And I actually think one of the more surprising things that's happened over the last year or so is we've had some, it's not surprising, but some incredibly fruitful discussions with the state engineer's office about just kind of, activities mostly on their distribution side. And kind of how we've just had really productive, really great working discussions. And I'll talk about some of those here when we get to the Snyderville Basin. But I think the process really is working as we intended. It was intended to kind of get out there, kick the tires. How are things working? What's not working? What can we do? So if anyone attended my 6-month status report in January, I included this slide because I feel like this is my life. I feel like we're the 5-ring circus over in the corner. No copyright stuff for the Olympics. I take no ownership. But basically, I see this as 5 rings. We have 1 ring is each of the 3 pilot areas, ongoing discussions with each of the pilot areas. 1 ring is ongoing discussions with the Division of Water Rights, making sure what we're doing is going to ultimately be something that the Division of Water Rights can approve in our change applications. And then 1 ring has been working with the Division of Water Resources, and primarily through Jacqueline Pacheco, and also Candace Hassenjaeger. And then we're all guinea pigs. So that's why the guinea pig is there. And we can't drop any of the plates, though I feel like one is moving slower than others. So this was our projected timeline that we presented to the board, to BOR. We are about a little over a year in. July 1 was our 1-year mark. We decided to do a 1.25 year update in September because we're going to have some more interesting things to say in December. So we'll do our annual update a little bit later than July. But pretty much where we are is Snyderville Basin, we're kind of still in the outreach and scoping stage. That project's going to be a little more complicated. But for the Price River pilot and the Cache Valley pilot, we're getting very close. I would say we're almost 85% done with where we want to be in those pilots with our initial discussions. And I'll move into kind of what we're doing now. But after our applications are in, it's really the intent that we take a step back, let the local water users see how the agreements work for them, and then come back about a year later and kind of assess how things worked. For Snyderville, it'll be a little bit of a different time frame. So this is us having lots of discussions with everybody. I wish we had fire hoses like that right now. So no, I just want to say right there's a caveat in that slide. That this, right now we're moving ahead, but these are still exploratory. I don't want to speak for anybody. I don't want to get out ahead of any of the parties, but this is kind of where we are. So our first is the pilot our pilot project in the Price River area. And the goal is to really encompass most of the Carbon Canal Company service area, moving down to Woodside Gauge, which is in the lower Price. And the reason that we chose the Price area in the first place was that the Price had already had a fair amount of leasing activity. And so the Price area had experience with both some Colorado River project leasing as well as a Pacific Core auction. And so the water users were very adept and attuned. And so part of the process there was, and part of the project here has been wrangling really sophisticated players who all have different ideas about kind of what they want to do, and getting them back on the page, on the same page for what a water bank under the water banking statute would look like. And it was kind of interesting because we have the ultimate goal of this project is to really support, to create an income stream for Carbon Canal Company shareholders, and then to support water flows to the Olson Reservoir, which is a joint Nature Conservancy and Division of Wildlife Resources project. And so that's kind of the ultimate goal. We had a lot of good discussions about what water could be leased. We're just going to stick to the consumptive portion of shareholder shares so that we don't have any impairment issues, even though ultimately the goal of the water is to support the reservoir. The parties to date participating are Carbon Canal Company, Price River Water Users Association, the Nature Conservancy, Trout Unlimited, Division of Wildlife Resources, and the bank applicant, because under the water banking statute, is the Price River Watershed Conservation District. And so we are probably at about 95% of getting our contract done between all those parties. We have one more meeting with the Carbon Canal Company board on 8/17, and then we're going to have another group meeting right after there. But the parties themselves have been negotiating pretty heavily the last couple months. They've restructured how the leasing arrangement is going to work a couple times, whether it's going to be direct shareholders, at least from the parties who want to lease, whether the direct shareholders talk to the company and the company does an annual lease. And at the end of the day, we figured it'd be simplest if the Carbon Canal Company was the lessor and they were leasing directly to TU, TNC, and Wildlife when they choose to participate. And then the shareholders created an internal process for opting into whether or not they wanted to participate in the lease for that year. And so it kind of has an annual meeting where the shareholders get together and decide if they want to opt in or opt out. So that one's going really well. It's going to be a contract. So this will be our first bank to come before the Board of Water Resources as a contract bank. And our timeline for that is we hope to get our contract complete by early September. And then I have a slide on this. And those are some of the issues we had to address in our contract discussions. Change application, we're working pretty heavily with Mark Stilson on our change application that will accompany the bank application. So we're hoping by September 1, we'll have our complete executed contract. We're hoping by mid-September, we'll have a version of our water banking application into the Division of Water Resources. Again, these are flexible dates. We don't want to push anybody, but those would be good ideal dates. And then by mid-September through late October, Division of Water Resources review, and either by the October 25th or December 9th board meeting, whichever makes sense for the division, we'd like to come to the board for seeking approval. And I'll talk to you in just a moment about what those documents and what that review process looks like. So that's kind of the one that's out ahead. The other one that's kind of interesting is our cache area pilot. And this has turned out to be a leasing arrangement between Hiram Irrigation Company and Wellsville-Mendon Conservation District, which are both members of the South Cache Water Users Association and hold storage water in Hiram Reservoir. And so at the end of the day, we've actually had 4 different banking conversations in Cache Valley. And this is, at the end of it, these are the parties that wanted to join, actually had an interest in leasing. And we had a lot of discussions about whether or not this even needed to be a water bank. And at the end of the day, we decided it didn't need to be a water bank. We didn't need to go through the application process. It was simpler just to keep it as a simple arrangement between the parties. And at the end of the day, the goal is to support all kinds of market activities. And so this will be included in our report, but we will not be seeing a water banking application associated with this contract. The more interesting aspect of this project is we had a lot of discussions with BOR about what would it be like to lease between members of an association who held a storage contract in a federal facility. And BOR said, as long as the members, the contract is with the association, as long as you're not changing the contract volumes and using the water in the same service area and for the same purposes, they seemed okay with it. So I think that's a good step forward. Utah has a lot of federal projects, so I think that this federal question is going to come up if people want to explore banking. So for this one, I think we're on track to have a contract signed by mid-September. September 1 might be optimistic. Or final contract complete by mid-September, signed by October, I think is realistic. And they'll run water in summer of 2022. There is an outstanding question, though, about how and whether the board wants this project to report information to them. I think they're willing to do so on a voluntary perspective because they're not going to be a water bank under the statute, but we do think it'd be helpful information as we kind of track marketing. And so maybe at the next couple board meetings, we can talk about what that would look like for them to participate. But they've been great to work with. It's been super fun. Kurt Lindley's awesome. He's a very funny man. Okay, and then Snyderville Basin. This is the one that's moving more slowly, and it makes sense because we chose the most complicated problems in the state to start on. But so the goal of the Snyderville Basin Bank is to increase flows during peak critical seasons, periods when it gets really hot, to try and save fish. I think I've said in the past that my terminology is irreparably stressed, which means dead. They can't come back. And so this is a pretty interesting idea. So the idea is that it's really a timed flow, almost like a pulse flow that has to, if we can get just a little bit more water 12 hours ahead of when it's needed, if we can do that. So this has, I think, been the most productive discussion with our state agency partners because Jared Manning's been fantastic. We've had great discussions with him. And, we said, hey, Jared, we want to do this along a, basically a 2-mile reach. What do you think we need to do to shepherd water along this 2-mile reach? And so we basically started out by saying, okay, here are the big 6 diverters. They have the most senior priority dates. We'd have to shepherd past these guys. We're going to keep in our priority system. And so then we realized, well, none of them have diversion structures that will allow us to know what's going on. So we had to identify kind of our technical limitations. And then from that, it really brought up a bigger question of how can you really know what's going on in one reach of a stream? And you really need to have a much broader understanding of like the broader system. And so this has spurred a lot of good discussion about, just kind of a broader view of what's happening in the Snyderville Basin. We also had a fantastic discussion about a week or 2 ago with Weber Basin. It is a little bit ancillary to the water bank, and so it's not in my lane, but part of this project's also to, stir discussion. And the state engineer in Weber Basin had really good discussions about the monitoring and metering and telemetry devices Weber Basin uses for their secondary meters. To basically, it's a radio system that can gather like 17,000 or something ridiculous amount of sites at once. And so in an area like Snyderville Basin that has a lot of groundwater wells, there's a really good fervent discussion about whether or not a system like that could be applied to gather a lot of information from groundwater wells. And so that's outside the water banking discussion, but it's been spurred by this discussion about how can we do this if we don't know what's happening on the ground. So that's from the technical side. On the water bank formation side, this is going to be a statutory bank. So under the Water Banking Act, we've got 2 different kinds of banks. We have a contract bank, which is basically a bank based on contract. And then we have a bank that is a statutory bank that is a legal entity organized for the purpose of facilitating leases. They're the middleman. You might have a couple different people who have water and a couple different people want to lease water. In Snyderville, the case is there's a lot of people who care about in-stream flows in East Canyon Creek, but it's nobody's baby. And so the goal of the bank and the entity would be to kind of help be that middleman. And so these are very nascent discussions, but we've had great discussions with Swanner Eco Preserve and Weber Basin Water Conservancy District as kind of being like the 2 primary parties who would be involved, and then several other local parties. But we're thinking this might kind of work to be an interlocal agreement of sorts, kind of along the way that Mount Nebo Water Authority operates, because the bank will require some administrative support and some power behind it. And so no one entity fits all the tasks needed to do the bank. And so perhaps splitting up those tasks amongst several entities who share the mission is a way to establish a good bank. That being said, we're in the middle of kind of figuring out what that looks like. We've got a couple of meetings next week to kind of follow up on some of those discussions, but this is moving slower. Realistically, I think in the 3-year time frame, if we can get to a point of agreeing what that form looks like, would be pretty realistic. We probably honestly won't run water through this bank in the pilot period, but it will be set up well to do so when the parties are ready. So realistically, we probably have an application in spring of 22, optimistically. And then this is the part that I think is most interesting. So what are we learning? And so part of the project too is also to have at the end of this 3-year period, usable documentation, guides, plans, information that water users can help decide whether or not this water bank is a good idea for them. And so we have a beta tested survey that is basically we're kind of putting it together right now, but it's basically a series of questions that have come up in all of our discussions. Is there demand? If there's not demand, you probably don't need a bank. Is there supply? Well, if everybody wants water, but nobody has it, you're probably not going to have a bank. Like some pretty basic questions, but like actually sitting down and asking them has been very, very helpful. And that's what happened in Cache Valley. We had 3 discussions where people thought they wanted a bank, and then we got down to the brass tacks, and there really wasn't structure or the desire to have one. So, we're also, while we're talking to the different agencies and while we're talking to the different pilot projects, we're also internally starting to develop our resources for the end of the report. Which leads us to, these are the statutory requirements. I'm not going to go through those. But basically, like board review. So one of those circles in the Olympic circus is the Board of Water Resources. And so we've been working pretty heavily with Jacqueline Pacheco, and Shalane has been really wonderful about designing some documents and review processes that mimic processes the board already does that would guide the board through the review of a water banking application. And so there's a couple key points in the statute and that we've incorporated into these documents, date the application is received, division. Oh, one thing before here. About 2 months ago, I created a outline for the price bank. And being the diligent attorney I am, every time it said Board of Water Resources, I was like, well, that has to be a Board of Water Resources meeting. And then I basically created like a 6-month timeline to get one of these done. And then I was very gently informed that board can also mean division. And it suddenly got a lot quicker. So we've kind of streamlined the process much upon the recommendations of Jacqueline and her team, where much of the work for the water banking application is going to happen at the division level. And then ultimately it's just going to result in a report to the board similar to how you would do your funding reviews. But there's a couple key points: the date it's received, there's an application review when it's complete, there's a public notice element, there's the applicant meeting, and the board report, and then board review. But what I like to show you now, and Paul, if we could switch to the other presentation real quick, and I don't want to take too much more of your time. But what we have now is a package of kind of draft documents. And so what we like to do is provide these to you after the meeting with kind of like a little bit of a memo about what we're thinking about how they can operate and work. But internally, we've been working about looking at your PDF fillable forms that you already have and fitting those into the water banking statutory requirements. And so, what we've come up with now is, the application process. The applications will be available on the Division of Water Resources website, just like your other applications are. The statutory water bank and the contract water bank application, they have different statutory requirements. The contract application is much more simple because the goal is that a lot of the onerous public meeting elements occur under the auspices of the applicant, who's a public entity. The statutory application is much more robust, but we don't have to do that for another year because Snyderville's slow, which has worked out great. The applicant, starts at the division level. They'd meet with the project manager. We'd review the requirements that need to be met before it's presented to the board. We'd obtain information for the report, very similar that you do for your funding projects. We really like the idea of an attorney opinion. Not that I want to give more work to the attorneys, but I think that is a helpful way to have some security in the process and also give some confidence in the process. And so we have included an attorney opinion that the application, meets the requirements of the statute. And again, these are draft. We're here to, if that's something that doesn't work, we won't do it. But we're trying to mimic it a little bit on your existing processes. And then ultimately, after the application's been reviewed, after there's been an opportunity on the contract side for a public meeting for the applicant, there'll be a project manager will make a recommendation to the board through a project letter, a board action letter. And unfortunately, these are a little small, so you can't really see them. Yeah, but you guys get the point. And essentially, each one of these boxes for the contract bank application mimics one of the statutory requirements. And so the statute has very simple requirements that are more administrative, like who are you? What is your address? That kind of thing. But then it also has, more substantive requirements of saying, what is your agreed to process for agreeing to price? You don't have to tell us what your price is, but, in your contract, you have to say, how are you going to come to price? And then the box would be see section 6.2 of the contract or whatever. Similarly, it's going to be a really pretty form. The attorney opinion covers all the statutory elements. Can I hit all the boxes? We've got kind of like a report template similarly structured to kind of how you guys do your loan funding reviews. And then at the end of it would be a board action letter. So, and I don't need to do the statutory bank. It's pretty similar. But that's kind of where we are. These are very much working documents. And I think the next stage for us is to put them in a nice package for the board with kind of an introductory letter and memo for you, and then kind of let you think about them and simmer on how you think about the process. And again, the price is going to be the first one that's going to be ready, but we're not on a time frame. I mean, we are on a time frame, but like we want it to be right. So we want the board to feel comfortable with kind of the process that we're creating. Okay. Questions? Sorry to talk on and on.
Questions for Emily?
Mr. Chairman, I was just wondering if the severity of the drought, and maybe it's not a fair question where this is the first attempt at creating water banks, but can you tell if there's more interest or if this is motivating people more to be interested in water banking, or is it too early to tell?
I had on one of my slides in the first presentation about things we've learned, and I think it said drought saps attention. Yeah, it's been hard to get people to focus, me included, because we've just been so busy on dealing with the real world problems. Not that these are not real world problems. That's one immediate consequence of the drought. I will tell you that we did have some initial discussions up in Cache Valley where there were a couple parties who had some storage water available that they typically didn't use that they were originally thinking they might want to lease. And this was early in the discussions, like February or so. And when the projections about kind of how dire the year was going to come, they said no. We right now we need that. We're not interested in, not in an adversarial way, but just like it's prudent for us to keep this in storage for us now. We don't need to take it out. So I think that is one aspect. I do think there's been a lot more 2.0 discussions that aren't ripe yet, but people are really starting to say, okay, if we do get measures that allow us to move to like depletion accounting, how is water banking going to work? And actually in the price area, there's some ancillary studies that are paid for by the parties that it's going to look at depletion accounting, and whether or not eventually we could get to a bank that can be based on depletion accounting to better incentivize, people to think differently about their water use. So I think that's one aspect of it. But those are 2.0 discussions for another day. But good discussions to be having.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Emily? So it sounds like our next board meeting, just looking at our calendar that we've got, September 16th and then October 28th. So one of those, it sounded like we may have an application.
We kind of aim for the October 28th one. We'd like to give you guys some time to review the documents and check back in September and make sure that we're comfortable with how we feel the documents are before we actually, throw it out at you. We might internally be getting our application ready on those documents, but I think we're moving for putting it to the division kind of mid-September after that meeting.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we would be in the price area on that.
Yeah, we're thinking of being in that area for that.
Oh, are you? Fantastic. Good. Well, we were supposed to be in Moab today, right? I marked out my calendar. I was so excited. Yeah. That's okay too.
That'll be good to get that moving along. I know that the timelines that were in the rule as far as meeting board approval and the dates for review and all that, it's going to take some coordination and that type of thing because they don't necessarily coincide very well.
Yeah, and we, depending on how you view the statute, and what needs to be board action and what needs to be division action, we made an onerous public notice requirement section, which is good. We want people to know. But, in our list of things we're thinking about, I don't want to touch the statute next year or the year after, but like in future years, that might be something we want to clean up after we get a couple under our belt.
Yeah, that was one of the things. The statute to me, board is right here, not staff,
Yeah.
put it specifically, a lot of the timelines on the board and that pretty onerous.
Yeah, no, it was onerous, but we did also give you the explicit authority to delegate to staff for that purpose. And that's what we need to talk about. What do you want to be yours? What do you want to be staff? What levels of comfort are there? So, and again, this is clay. We're making it up as we go.
Sure. Okay. Great. Anything else for Emily? Okay, thank you, Emily. Appreciate the update. More to come, it sounds like. And does anyone here have any comments on the water banking presentation? Okay, with that on the agenda, we're to director's report. Director Adams, give us a report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you asked in the briefing meeting, I gave some of this report already. We talked a little bit about the drought and Colorado River Authority, some ARPA funding, some staffing changes, drought and more drought, board tour, those types of things. With the drought and what you've heard here today, we have had a lot of press. There are several legislators that have reached out to the department, to the division on potential water conservation issues going into the legislative session. We will continue to work with those legislators and see where it goes. It's August. We're not too far away from a legislative session, 6 or 7 months. So we are working towards that. I just want to take a minute, and I'll keep this really short, but I want to thank you all, board members, for your service and in all that you do for the board, for the state of Utah. Thank you so much. And then to our staff, water resources staff is just second to none, as you've heard in some of these discussions and reports about the work that's going on and all the many things that they're doing. It's just wonderful to be part of an organization that is working so hard for the citizens of Utah. So I just want to give a shout out to our great staff, and that's my report.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, final item on our agenda is adjournment. We have a motion to adjourn. We already had the comments that were there. Are there any other comments? We had the two. We took care of them already, the two that we mentioned, but any other comments in addition? Okay, ready for a motion?
So moved.
Okay,
I'll second.
Jim's, who moved it then? Norman made a motion to adjourn. Jim seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Anybody want to stay here? Okay, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, if any? Motion carries. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance. It's now 2:48 p.m. Thanks.